We're going to talk about why religious freedom is an unalienable right and first freedom in America. When the Pilgrims came to America in the early 1600s, they came for religious freedom and to set up a pure church in America. But their view of religious freedom was initially characterized by religious conformity. Everyone worshiped the same way. And they maintained this conformity by having a state church that combined the church and government in Massachusetts and Connecticut, which is where they were colonized. And this was in keeping with the old European system that combined the church and government. And it was all that they knew at that time, really. So if you were a dissenter with different beliefs or worship, you had to keep your views to yourself, or you were free to leave and go elsewhere. But dissenters did emerge. One notable dissenter was Pastor Roger Williams. Williams argued that the Puritan church was not pure enough because it was combined with the government. He didn't like the government regulating religion and financing the church. He actually wanted to separate these institutions in order to have a more free and pure church. And he saw this idea in the Bible in Isaiah 5, which describes God's people as a pure garden enclosed from the wilderness of the world. And he called that enclosure a wall of separation. Interestingly, Thomas Jefferson, as president, later used that same wall metaphor to defend religious freedom. So Williams was banished from Massachusetts, and he founded the tolerant colony of Rhode Island in 1634 or 1643. A year later, it's not very well known, but he wrote an essay defending religious freedom, and it was called The Bloody Tenet of Persecution for the Cause of Conscience. Now, conscience at that time referred to a person's inner beliefs and convictions. We talk about that. Well, not long after, British Quaker William Penn arrived in America. And while in England, Penn had been persecuted for his nonconformist religious beliefs. He also protested religious persecution there. Penn had actually traveled in Europe, and he saw persecution in all of the European countries. The Protestant countries were persecuting Catholics and other nonconformists. The Catholic countries were persecuting the Protestants and nonconformists. So he supported religious tolerance. And he also wrote an essay on religious freedom. It was called A Great Case of Liberty of Conscience. Well, it happened that Penn was granted a tract of land in America by King Charles II as a debt repayment to his family. And Penn took that opportunity to found the tolerant colony of Pennsylvania in 1682. Around this time, British philosopher John Locke came on the scene. And Locke is considered a secular thinker by many, but he actually grew up in a Puritan home. He also supported religious tolerance. And Locke did not found a colony in America, but he did write the Constitution for the colony of Carolina in 1669. And that supported religious tolerance. Well, in response to the persecution going on in England at that time, Locke wrote a letter concerning toleration, and it would become very influential in America on this issue. The tolerant colonies in America were significant because they were the first in history and the world to practice freedom of belief. They didn't have a enforced religious conformity or have a state church. Now, they didn't have total religious freedom. In Rhode Island, some did not have full civil rights, like Jews, Catholics, and atheists, but their beliefs were tolerated. In Pennsylvania, only Christians could be citizens, yet all types of Christians were allowed. Carolina did have a state church, but it was more tolerant than some of the others. Interestingly, Maryland was the one colony founded by Catholics. It was founded by Lords Baltimore, George and Cecil Calvert in 1634. Williams, Penn, and Locke shared a lot of the same arguments for religious freedom. It's important to know that their assertions were strongly rooted in the Bible, nature, and reason. In fact, they were also similar to the Reformers, Luther and Calvin. Some key points they asserted were, one, that God alone is ruler and judge of man's conscience. They believe that though the government can regulate earthly things, like man's outward behavior, it has no power or authority over spiritual things. And they drew this distinction from the Bible in Matthew 22, where Jesus says, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." 2, they argued that religious force is contrary to the order of nature. Force reduces man's natural faculties of morality, conscience, intellect, and choice. So it degrades humans, which no one has the right to do, of course. 3, they argued true faith comes from understanding and choice. Force cannot persuade the heart and mind, and it only makes men hypocrites in their actions. So instead, people should speak, write, reason, and debate their beliefs. And this was some of the quotes that related to the quote we talked about. 4, religious force is contrary to the teachings of Christ in the Bible, they argued, such as life, peace, gentleness, forgiveness, charity, or love for others. And in the Bible, for example, Ephesians 4 speaks of bearing with one another in love. Locke thought that charity was essential for tolerance. He actually defined charity as love, forbearance, or benevolence toward others. And 5, truth can prevail amid other ideas. Truth doesn't need force because it holds its own qualities and strength. And this was mainly Locke's argument. He observed that the inventions of men and religion need the force and helps of men to support them. But a religion that is of God does not need the assistance of human authority to make it prevail. So with these ideas and their tolerant colonies, Williams, Penn, and Locke brought the issue of religious freedom to the forefront of the American mind. They influenced American thought and culture and advanced religious freedom in America.